What's going on, everybody? TripleCrown24 back today. I am doing a response video, something I seldom do on this channel, but our friend Neo at Neo Cards and Comics put out a fantastic 22-minute video last week called "Are Card Shows Even Worth Attending Anymore?" And in his thumbnail, he poses an addendum to that, which is, "Are repackers ruining card shows?" This was a really well done video. It's 22 minutes long. I highly recommend watching it as a prerequisite to this one. Link in the description down below. But I want to expand upon the foundations of this video and add my perspective, which is more of a dealer POV in this case, and also kind of talk more about some of the observations that I've had with these repackers and how they have impacted shows and kind of what goes on with these repacks, and also what will kind of be the aftermath of what we're seeing right now. How is this going to play out as we head into the spring and eventually into the summer leading up to the National? Disclaimer time. I'm stating my opinions here. I'm stating things as I perceive them, and also, to the best of my ability, retelling portions of Neo's video. You can feel free to disagree. A lot of what I'm saying is not necessarily fact. It is how I perceive it, but I'm sure there will be a lot of people out there who agree with me. But I know sometimes people get a little butthurt when you're sharing your opinion. Just putting it out there as a disclaimer ahead of time. To summarize Neo's video, with that out of the way, he shared his experience going to the Chantilly show, and he didn't pick up a single card. What he was reporting is something that I have experienced quite a bit in my journeys here, really for the last 8 months or so, where a lot of repackers are getting to these dealers early, before general admission opens for larger regional shows, and really even before a lot of the dealers arrive at some of the more large local shows. Now, what is the difference between the two? Because Neo kind of makes a distinction here, saying that this has been happening at these regional shows for some time, and now it has crept into larger local shows. A regional show is going to be these multi-day shows where people are flying into them, generally speaking. They're coming into a Philly, a Dallas, a Burbank, the aforementioned Chantilly. You know which ones I'm talking about. The larger local shows is going to be what's going on in your neck of the woods specifically. If you want to look at one, for me, for example, Xenia is what best fits that description. It's a couple hundred tables. It's not as big as these larger regional shows, but it's not just something that's in a VFW every once in a while, although I have seen some repackers go into those places as well. But it is very prevalent in those. I know Neo said that it's starting to creep into those. Not around here, it hasn't. It's been going on for a while now. And the reason I can say that is because I keep track of it. This is my sheet that I bring to all my shows. I print off a new one each time. If you see me walk around with what looks like a big old playbook, I promise you it's not. It's a sheet that shows all my cards and what I'm into them at. And I also keep track of my sales. I like to see what I get out of all my cards. It's for financial purposes. But one of the things that I've noticed really as far back as late last summer after the National are more and more large-scale deals. I'm talking 10, 15, 20 cards at a time out of my showcase. Not my value boxes, my showcase, which I only put things that are $10 and up in my showcases. And while I don't always necessarily remember the exact name of whoever bought them, I can usually remember the deal in my head. And I know when they're going to repackers, even if they're not telling me they're repackers, it's kind of easy to put two and two together more often than not. But it's been going on for quite some time. And there's both pros and cons to it, not only for myself as a dealer, but for the patrons going around the shows and even for the repackers themselves. And that's what I want to get into. Some might say, as a dealer, don't you love that because you're making money hand over fist, aren't you? I can't deny that. I am definitely having record sales numbers. I'm having some of my most successful shows ever, and things are selling sometimes even before I can put them out in my showcases. These guys know where I set up at most of the time. They know what kind of stuff I'm going to have, and I tell them to help themselves when they come up. Build a stack, come up with your number. I'll tell you where I'm at, and if we need to find middle ground, we will. And it's a seamless transaction. The ones who usually come back to me are ones that are very professional. We are kind of on the same wavelength. We kind of know each other and what our expectations are for each. And really, it's about as good as you could ask for. as a dealer. And some people might ask, well, why would you complain about that? I'm not. I really am not. Because I'd much rather have this, I guess you could call problem, quote unquote problem, than it being the other way around where I can't sell a thing. It's a lot easier to navigate this than it is that. The downside comes when the show is over or it's later in the day and it's time to restock. When it's my turn to go walk around and see if I see anything I like, or someone comes up to me to try to sell things. Because a lot of times these repackers, they've already gone around and bought up all of the cards that I'd be interested in as well. They have, as Neo put it, duffel bags full of cash, and they're buying up also, as he put it, I love this term, anyone with a pulse in ultra modern football, they're buying up those cards. And because of that, it makes it a little bit more challenging for me because they're even buying this stuff up from the people who are walking around the shows. I've even had people ask or not ask, they've done it without my permission, use my table to ask people, hey, are you buying anything? By the way, pro tip, don't do that at a show. You will probably get kicked out if the promoter catches wind of it. But it is really, I've never seen anything like it where at the National, I was flagged down many times by people who, some of them were repackers looking to get to things. All the trade nights that I go to at the larger shows, like when I went to Culture Collision, I sold through a lot of stuff at the trade nights when I went to buy. I wasn't even trying to sell things, but there were a few repackers who I ran into who have always treated me fairly. Again, I kind of know what they're looking for. I like doing business with them, and we made a deal pretty easy. And how could I really say no? If it makes sense, I'm not going to hold back my inventory to sell it exactly when I want it. But at the same time, then it becomes a lot more difficult to acquire new cards to sell. And Neo says the same thing in his video. But there was some brushback to that in the comments. I went through the comments pretty extensively to see what people thought about this. And some people thought that that claim was ridiculous. How could dealers not be able to buy new cards? There's millions of cards being graded every few months by PSA. There's all these new products that are coming out. There's more cards than ever. That is true. And I will speak for myself when I say this. The difficulty is not acquiring cards. I always say this when we're talking about the videos that say like they spent X amount at whatever show they went to. You know who else could spend $10,000 at a show? I could. If you give me $10,000, I'm really good at spending money. I could do that very easily. The question is, can you buy those cards at a price point that makes sense as a dealer, where I can put them out and people are not going to scoff at my sticker prices? I can at least put them in range where we can start negotiations at the very least. That's my goal when I'm buying inventory. I don't want things that are sitting there that are grossly overpriced. Now, some people might think my stuff is grossly overpriced if I'm asking 110% of one sale one time, but yeah, can't really do much about that. I'm talking more in general that at least it lets you get a foot in the door when I'm buying this stuff up. And I want to be buying quality cards. I want to be buying not the same base prisms and silvers and pink camos that a lot of people have in their showcases, because at these local shows, more often than not, a lot of the inventory that guys have, unless they're putting some serious time into it, it's going to be the excess things that they don't necessarily want in their collections anymore, things that they're ready to move on from, or something that they hit in either a break, a personal box, or more often than not, a personal retail box, be it a blaster, a mega, whatever your preferred retail rip of choice may be. That is what I often see. And the slabs that they have are stuff that they pulled and graded themselves. That's what I see most often at a lot of your local shows. Perhaps it's a little bit of a higher end premium selection when you go to these regional shows, but that is because the cost of entry to get into these shows in terms of your setup and your overhead to even set up at one of these shows with gas, any other travel expenses, hotel, is going to add up. And you're going to have some big cards to justify that kind of trip if you're anticipating being a vendor for those. But it also hurts the buyers. Now, the buyers, again, they're being poached by the repackers. How is that a bad thing? These repackers, they're paying them strong, right? You know, I'm paying you this percentage. Neo says that's all based off of this percentage system that has come up. And the repackers are offering a higher percentage than a lot of the dealers are. In a lot of cases, if the people were getting this number on eBay after fees, they're getting more from the repackers. They might not get the gross amount that you would get through eBay, but you're at least getting a net amount that is more online. How could that possibly be a bad thing? Well, after you sell those cards and you have that money, if you're looking to put it back into the hobby, if you're looking for certain cards of hot players, well, you might have a difficult time finding them. And again, if you do find them on the show floor, they're probably still there for a reason. That's definitely one of the downsides. And Neo also mentions this in the video that you might have to pay full rip on something. He talked about a CJ Stroud Silver Prism, where you might have to pay up for it because as he put it, the dealers have to pay more than to acquire their inventory, or the dealers know the repacker is going to offer them more. If we're talking percentages again, if you're at 80% and a repacker is at 90%, why would they not just defer to the repacker's higher percentage? And also, the repacker is probably going to buy multiple cards. If we're working off this percentage concept, right? Makes sense to me. It's going to make it a little bit more difficult for the buyers. And the repackers at this point have started to cannibalize themselves in a sense, where I see some buying from one another, which is kind of interesting to me. But they have created a lot of competition for themselves because the repack game is so profitable. And I'll tell you why it's so profitable here in a little bit, and kind of how I have kind of learned that they get their bag, so to speak. But because there are so many repackers out there, there are only so many cards in the room that fit the quality or the criteria, I guess you could say, for their repacks, where they're in the sweet spot range of what they want. And some duffel bags full of cash, as Neo put it, are larger than others. I know that Justin, my good friend, who I talked to him about this repack stuff a lot, and he had told me that at the Dallas card show the last time he went, there were guys who were repackers who were kind of frustrated because they couldn't find anything for the repacks. A lot of the big guys had gone around and purchased everything up already. Even at the trade nights, they were there, kind of going nonstop, buying up all these cards for their repacks and somewhat monopolizing the game. And therefore, your little smaller fish in the sea, as far as the repacks go, they're not going to have enough cards because they need the cards. You can't run your 100 card repack with 40 cards. I could want to have 100 cards in my showcase for a show, but could I set up with 80 or 70 or 60? Yeah, I could do that. I'm not going to make as much probably, but it's not going to kill me. It doesn't mean I can't do business or I can't do what I'm trying to do. These repackers have to hit these quotas. And while they're able to buy up a lot of these good cards and usually get a deal on them because they are buying in quantity, again, they've created a lot of competition and infighting within themselves to kind of jockey for position with one another. I have about 6 guys, I would say, locally who are repackers who come up to me and they buy cards from a really, they're repeat customers, and I love dealing with them. They're some of my best customers out there in terms of they're really friendly dudes. I talk to them on Instagram or whatever. Always an easy negotiation. It doesn't feel like I'm pulling teeth with them. Now, there are some repackers where it does feel like that. Sometimes you guys have seen it in some of the card show vlogs that I do. But I'm talking about these 6 guys. And if you don't get there before these 6 guys, because sometimes they are there before even I am there, you might be SOL if you're a repacker. If you get there to a show that starts at 9 a.m. and you get there at noon or 1 o'clock because you wanted to sleep in, sorry, Charlie, you might be out of luck because they have already been working the show floor all morning long. And if you're late to the dance, then you're going to be left without a dance partner. Now, this is the other part of this. All right, so Neo asked this kind of at the end of this, is that it would stand to reason that a lot of the people joining these repacks aren't getting cards that they would want to collect. And that makes sense to me. I could see it more with a break. There's a lot of pick your team breaks out there. You can pick the cards of the team or the player that you're chasing more so than you can with a break or with a repack, excuse me. Especially multi-sport repacks. You may not even get a sport that you collect. You could join a repack and say that you only do the big four sports and you get a soccer card. What are you going to do with that soccer card? You've never opened a pack of soccer cards in your life. It would stand to reason that you're going to try to sell it. But I'm not seeing a lot of these cards that go into these repacks come back out. And I say that for a few reasons. It's because other people have told me the same thing, that they're not seeing as many of these cards. And a lot of these cards, I don't feel like there's a lot of loyalty to them, especially in your ultra modern football game. They are changing hands a lot more rapidly than other cards that I might deal in, for example. But when I ask people where they are getting their stuff from out of curiosity, I really don't get the answer repacks too often. I get people telling me they got them in breaks. I get people who are telling me they bought them off eBay or they bought them somewhere, or from ripping wax. Usually their own retail wax, but it could be hobby wax as well. That's where they're getting a lot of these cards from. Now, some breaks do incorporate repacks into them, like Backyard, for example. They have whatever their gimmick is for a repack, and sometimes they'll throw like a couple of those repacks into a team break of Prism football, we'll say, for example. And then you might be able to customize it a little bit more. But I'm talking for repack only breaks, where the only thing is in them, it's no sealed product that's put out by a first party like Panini or Topps. It is strictly these repacks that are assembled by these people. And because these cards are not going back out, where are they going? Who is joining these repacks? And why are they not then selling the cards that they're getting out of these repacks? Because I don't feel like they're genuinely interested in keeping them. Now, I don't know the exact answer to this. I really don't. I have my best guess. I asked Neo in the comments section of this video what I thought his answer was. He had no clue as well. Here's my best guess of where I think that these cards are going. And this is based on observation because I did a little homework prior to this video. And even prior to my podcast episode I put out a few weeks back about repackers. Because I went through and I watched some repacks of varying levels of buy-in. I've seen some $20 to $50 repacks, seen some that are $100 to $300. I've seen some upwards of $500 to $600. That's really the max level that I saw in the last few weeks, kind of just studying these repacks and how they work. And I've been able to infer a few things from them based on my observations. I'll give you one example. I won't name the names of the repackers themselves because, quite frankly, I don't remember a lot of them. I was more so taking notes on what I saw rather than the specific details. But there was one that I saw where out of 40 of the packs that had sold, this was an 80 card repack, or 80 pack repack, I should say. Halfway through, of those 40 packs, 21 of them had been purchased by two people. And these repacks were selling for an average of $300 a piece. There was another one I saw, 100 repacks. Again, 40 through, so not even halfway through, where two people had purchased 28 of them. Just between two people, and they were selling at $150 each. Now, not as much, but I did the math. And based on how often these people stream, I can kind of see their schedule and stuff. And I kind of know that a lot of these repackers, they do it weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly in some cases. I took if they did it even monthly, which was the most infrequent amount of repacks that are recurring. These people who had bought in that many packs, if they would have done this consistently month after month, would be spending upwards of $25,000 a year on just this one repacker. And some of them I see again and again in different rooms. There's a guy who I saw in 3 of the 10 repackers that I was following and watching their streams that I took notes on, who I've seen in breaks for 10 plus years now. Multiple break rooms. Pretty much every break room I've ever watched or any repacker stream I've ever been in, he was in there at one point or another and buying packs, not a pack, packs. Now, I don't know what his personal situation is. I don't know what the personal situation is for any of these people. I don't know if they are married. I don't know if they have kids. I don't know what they do for a living. I don't know what their responsibilities are, nor is that really any of my business because they can just spend their what I hope is discretionary income however they want. Again, it's not my business, but I really hope that this is fun money, right? You never want to see someone get into trouble or get into debt because of cards. Unfortunately, it probably is happening in some of these streams that I'm watching. But that's a different topic for a different day. I don't want to get too dark in that regard. But a lot of these repackers are kind of being propped up by repeat customers, kind of in the same way that a lot of the repackers are buying up a lot of my cards at the shows. It is these really large customers who are coming in and buying up a lot of these repacks. That to me is fascinating because if they have all this extra money, you would think that they would want to recoup some of it, right? If they're joining this many repacks. But on the opposite side of the coin, if they are spending this much money and it is, again, discretionary income, they don't really need this. This is how they have fun. Then they might not feel the need to sell these cards. Or if they do, they can ask whatever they want for them because they don't have to sell them. It would just kind of be, oh, if someone gives me my number type of thing, right? On a lot of these cards. That is what I feel is going on, is that the majority of these cards are going to big time buyers who have enough money where they do not need to sell the cards that they get out of these repacks. They join them for fun. It's how they choose to hobby, and that's fine. But that's why you don't see these cards coming back out. And what does this mean for the future? Well, as long as there are buyers out there willing to buy into these repacks, and I said this as such in my podcast a few weeks back, that there are more people gravitating towards these than breaks because the ROI on a lot of these repacks has been a lot better than breaks. Where most repacks I see, you usually get at least 50% of your value back. Now, there are times where I see people only get 10 to 20% if they hit a floor. It happens. But most of the time, they're getting a greater expected ROI than they would joining a break. And look, usually either way, it's going to be a losing proposition more often than not, unless you play the odds to a certain extent. And there are ways to do that, but the opportunities for that and those potential discrepancies, usually someone else is thinking the same thing and they bid it up to the point where that discrepancy is no longer in play. It no longer makes sense to take that chance because the expected value is then once again into the negatives. And what I think you're going to see going forward is that a lot of these smaller repackers will probably be weeded out because there are only so many big spenders out there to go around. And if any of them eventually dry up or decide that they want to cut their losses or they simply lose interest and move on to a different hobby, those repacks are not going to be as successful because it's going to take more and more people to join in. And if the expected value isn't there or it keeps going down, then you might be in trouble. Also, part of that is that it depends on the repacker themselves. Now, there are some that I've seen that do it really well, right? They're pretty fair with their values. Not everything is always spot on, but I feel like they have done enough where they can be given the benefit of the doubt. Now, there are a lot where that is not the case because I went through and studied them and I picked out 10 streams. And I was looking at the big chaser, which a chaser in a repack is a card that is well above the rest of the cards. It's the best possible card you can get. When you see the terms ceiling, floor, and average, ceiling is what is the best card you can get out of this repack? And what is the value of that card? And out of the 10 that I saw, 8 of the 10, the ceiling card was valued at higher than any of the sales on it that I could see. I don't know exactly how they came up with that value. And what I find interesting about that is that a lot of these repackers, when they come up to me, the ones that I usually don't make a deal with, try to be Mr. and Mrs. Moral High Ground, right? Where they have to buy at a certain percentage because people are going to get mad in their repack streams if they're below this. I didn't see a single person getting mad at any of these streams. Now, am I watching the chat like a hawk? Did I record every single chat comment that was put in there? No. But I was scrolling through as I was listening to it in the background. And every once in a while, I'd check out the comments to see if anybody had said anything. I didn't see a negative comment in there or anyone was calling them out saying, like, oh, that's not worth that much, or no comp police that I was seeing in there. I'm sure there are times where that happens, but I also imagine if you said that, you would probably get a very quick ticket to the banishment zone, and you would no longer be welcomed in those streams if you said something like that out there. And I highly doubt that platforms such as Whatnot are going to shut down a lot of these guys if they are generating tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, or in the cases of the big time guys, millions of dollars a year in revenue, because Whatnot's going to take that 12% of that all the way to the bank. Why would it harm them to shut it down if there's really nothing per se that is violating the rules? But out of all these main chases, 8 out of the 10 of them, I did not see a single sale that was at that price of that card. Maybe back in like 2021, but if we're using sales from back then, well, I have a lot of stuff I would like to sell you as well using those prices. Let's just put it that way. The other two were cards that were transacted more often. One of them was a base Patrick Mahomes Donruss rated rookie PSA 10. I'll tell you what that one was. The other one was a RPA. I forget exactly which product it was, but it was a Justin Herbert RPA. I think it was Immaculate. It was a card that had a string of recent sales. There had been like 5 or 6 that had sold in the last 6 months or so. And you could get a pretty good feel for the value. But both of those cards were at the very high end of all those sales in recent times. If you want to take the last 5 sales of that card, they were valued at the ceiling of that, which is kind of funny because when these repackers come up to me, a lot of them who say that like they need to have room and stuff, that, oh, I gotta buy it at 85% because I gotta go on the average, or they want to buy it at the 85% of the lowest sale. And that's really how they're making their margins, right? Because if they're buying at 90 to 95%, again, using that percentage-based system that Neo says, how does that make any sense if they're selling their repacks? Let's say that they sell the repacks at 100%, and then Whatnot takes 12%. How is that profitable? Or even if they're buying at 85% and you say it's a 3% profit margin, is the juice really worth the squeeze there, going around and acquiring all these cards, setting up all the repacks and shipping them all out? Doesn't seem like time value of money really adds up there. And it's because it's not 85% of the average sale. It's not even 85% of the only sale. It's 85% of a value in their head where they can then sell it at 120 to 150% in their whatnot repacks. More often than not. And again, it's not every single repacker out there. I want to make that perfectly clear. But that's what I'm starting to notice more and more often, just kind of studying this and putting the pieces of the puzzle together, is that a lot of these guys, their margins are pretty good. And I think what you're going to see is because of the level of competition with them, dealers are going to start to tighten up. I know Justin and I have talked about it, is that we have to tighten up on our prices a little bit, because people who want to buy from me at 80 to 85% on my best cards, I can't do that. First of all, I can't acquire them for that price, so why would I sell them at that price? And second of all, if I knew that I can sell them in the snap of my fingers and have people wind up willing to buy those at those prices, why would I not try to push for a little bit more, especially if I'm not able to make as many deals out there? And you're probably going to see dealers raise their prices to meet demand, or at least what I feel is somewhat of an artificial demand. But as long as these repacks maintain relevancy, as long as these repacks continue to have big time spenders who go in and don't necessarily care even that the values for averages and floors and ceilings might be a little bit off, they just want to have something to do, these things are going to keep going. But I can almost guarantee you this, is that eventually the well will dry up a little bit, and some of these repackers are going to have to start teaming up or cannibalizing themselves even more so, or they're not going to be able to have enough cards to put in their repacks to run them as frequently as they want them. And I can almost guarantee you that Fanatics is going to toss their hat into the ring on this as well. We saw this happen when wax flipping was a big thing. We saw this happen when PSA got shut down. You know what a lot of these companies did? They raised their prices. Panini and Topps said, "Why are you guys making all this money on our wax that we have at SRP? We're going to raise SRP. We're going to do Dutch auctions. We're going to raise our pre-sale prices to keep more of this money in-house because it's selling for this anyway." And can you blame them for doing that, for keeping the money in-house rather than letting some flipper get it? I certainly can't. That sounds like a good business model to me. Why would you not take profits? Why would you leave those on the table? I know that it impacts the collector negatively, but the collector's not able to get these boxes at those prices anyways, so what's the point? Same thing with grading stuff. PSA raises their bulk prices. There's no more $10 submissions or even back in the day $6 submissions because everybody will send in every single base Prism rookie they get and try to sell it for 15 or 20 minimum. So usually sometimes 25, even if they get an 8. Like, oh no, I graded it, so it's got to be worth more than the grading fees, right? And now both those things have slowed down. The wax flipping game is definitely, you don't see as many people clearing the shelves at Target and all that. You don't necessarily see as many people sending in every single card that they hit that has any kind of potential to be graded. But this is just the next evolution of that. And to answer the original question of are card shows even worth attending? Yes. Repackers might have a different taste. And hey, if you like baseball or basketball, you're probably a lot more in luck because really the sports that are getting hit the hardest of this is football. I have no problem stocking quality baseball cards and selling quality baseball cards. In fact, I didn't really have any repackers come up to me at the last show I set up at this past weekend. And some of my biggest sales were on baseball cards. They usually don't target those. So that's your thing. I have some good news for you. You're probably not going to be impacted by this. If you like ultra modern football, I got some bad news. You probably are impacted by this, and you might have to be a little bit more crafty in finding stuff. But it is absolutely worthwhile to attend these shows. Also, because there's a lot of shows out there. Like I said, there weren't really any repackers that I could pick up on at the show I was set up at. Meaning that if you wanted to go try to find something, hey, it was open season. You know, they weren't going around buying up everything that was reasonably priced if you went to this show over the weekend. It's because there was a competing show across town that I feel like kind of split the crowd and it presented an opportunity. And one of the things that Neo mentions as well is the trade nights. I feel like that, yes, there are repackers who go to the trade night, but you're on a little bit more of a equal playing field, I would say, when you go there. And there are a lot of people who go to trade nights where you might not necessarily run into the same problem. And I think Neo stating that there needs to be kind of formalized trade nights for a lot of these regional shows that don't already have them. Yeah, I could see that. And I feel like that's something that could be put together with a little bit of effort. I'm not going to say it's a no-brainer. Again, easier said than done. If you want to properly rent out a venue, we're not taking over the Lowe's hotel lobby. That's how you get it shut down real quick, people. You know, let's formally rent out a space and host a trade night. Maybe have a few sponsors if it's a larger person who can sponsor a trade night if it's that big of an event. Let's do it the right way. Let's do it formally. But yeah, I feel like that would definitely alleviate it because at the Ship Shawana show, I didn't see it as much. A lot of the repackers that I saw there, they went around on the trade night, and it definitely took a lot of the pressure off the dealers the next day at the show because I didn't see any of those guys there that, or if they were there, they were set up selling cards, meaning that you didn't have any competition walking around the show floor. Again, just my 2 cents on it. I'd love to know what you think in the comments section down below. But I think you're going to see some things change. I think you're going to see dealers kind of tighten up on their prices a little bit. I know I've kind of had to do that just because I'm not able to make as many deals. I think that you're going to see some of the smaller repackers kind of fade out as they are kind of defeated in their competition to acquire all these cards. And ultimately, I think that you're going to see this start to turn sooner rather than later. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Until next time, take care, stay safe, be kind.